Hey, good morning, folks. It's Pastor Steven back again with another No Frills daily devotional. And today's topic is unexpected fruit. It's this idea of, hey, where did that come from, right? And so I'm going to be kind of finishing out First Peter this week. And so I encourage you to keep tracking with me through these last few episodes as we finish up that text. And Peter's going to be he's been taking us through this topic of suffering, okay? And he's starting to reveal now towards the end of the book just kind of like what the unexpected fruit of suffering is, right? Because suffering doesn't sound like fun, okay? But there's good fruit that's gained from suffering, believe it or not. And one of the really good fruits that's gained from suffering that Peter is really going to start to drive home as he's finishing up this letter to first century believers is this fruit of selflessness, not selfishness, this fruit of selflessness. And so he's going to start to wrap up, suffering, and it's going to lead him into this topic of selflessness. And selflessness is one of these unexpected fruits of suffering. Think about it like this. Maybe you've known somebody who's had maybe a really traumatic experience or a near-death experience, or maybe you know somebody who kind of went through cancer and chemo treatment and stuff like that, and how on the other side of that, right, maybe they seemed like a completely different person to you. And it's this idea that actually comes from scripture that suffering oftentimes gives us a new take on life, or gives us a new outlook, or you'll hear somebody use the expression, I got a new lease on life, right? And it's through this process of suffering, I think, that we start to realize that this life isn't about me. Right? It's not about me, and it's not about my pursuit, and it's not about my dreams, and it's not about my selfish desires anymore. My life is meant to be about so much more, and suffering can help to produce that fruit. Do you have to go through suffering to have that realization in your life? No, but oftentimes suffering does help to uncover that kind of fruit. Let me show it to you in scripture. Okay, so this is First Peter, this is chapter 4, and he's on the home stretch here, all right? He's in the last couple chapters. He's finishing out the last few paragraphs of his letter to us as Christians and to these first century believers. And he says, this is verse 1 of chapter 4. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves with the same attitude. That's a key word there. Because he who has suffered in his body is done with sin. Okay? And I'm going to pause there for just a second, because it's this idea that suffering helps me to realize that life is so much more than just my selfish pursuit. That's what Peter's trying to say through that phrase, done with sin. Okay? As a result, he's going to continue on. He does not live the rest of his earthly life for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. And Peter is trying to drive home this point that suffering, one of the unexpected fruits of suffering, is this idea of selflessness. And selflessness is going to be something that's going to be really key for you and I to realizing what our purpose in life is and what our potential is as Christians and followers of Jesus. Because here's a concept that I really want to hit you with and leave you with today. It's this idea that selfish people are stuck people. If you know anybody in your life that just seems kind of stuck, they're just kind of stuck in neutral, they're just kind of spinning their wheels and they're not making any traction. Maybe you're that person, okay? I know I've been there before. A lot of times we are stuck because of our own selfishness and our own selfish pursuits. And think about it like this. Selfishness, it's one of the key limiting factors to our personal growth. Okay, I have a story from football. I used to be a football coach, and I had this athlete one time, and he started off the year, he was a freshman, excited about football. Okay, he was kind of new to our program, and so he starts off the year, and he's working, kind of hard at the beginning. But he wasn't like one of our stellar athletes. He hadn't really done anything all throughout the summer to prepare him, right? And I just started to see his his progress in football just start to wane and get worse and worse and worse and worse. And it just seemed like he was trying less in practice and he just wasn't getting anywhere. He wasn't getting any playing time. And so I had a conversation with him one night after one of our games. And I just said, hey man, what's going on? It just seems like your attitude is just kind of going downhill and you're just not really trying anymore at practice. And what's going on? And he said, well, coach, I'm not getting any playing time. Like, okay, okay. Well, where do you envision yourself playing? And so he told me, how he wanted to be on special teams. I'm like, okay, all right. Well, we've got 9 spots on special teams. All right, you tell me the name of the athlete who you're going to replace then. He's like, because I said, you're going to have to replace somebody. And so you tell me the name of the athlete you're going to replace, and you tell me how you're going to outwork him this week so that you can replace him. And he was like, right? Because he was thinking about himself. He was thinking about his desire. I want to be out on the field. I want that position. And when I'm not getting that position, now my attitude gets bad and I'm starting to give up. And that's what Peter is trying to hit at. It's this idea that selfishness gets us stuck where we're only concerned about what's happening in this tiny little bubble right here, right? And Peter wants to burst that bubble and get us to realize that this life ain't about us, right? It's about a bigger purpose than that. And one of the fruits of suffering is popping that bubble and helping us to realize that there is so much more to this life than what Stephen Schultz wants from it, right? And that's what Peter is hoping that you and I understand and what these first century believers understand, because Jesus left us this beautiful model of going through suffering for the sake of us to realize that this life ain't about you and me. Hey, you guys, have an awesome, awesome day. Be blessed.